What's up? It's Marvin of the Miles Ahead podcast. For today's episode, it will be based on the NBA, pertaining to the past Hall of Fame weekend, playoff, and play-in talk. It would also be a collaboration episode with Mike from Mike in New Haven podcast on MC's apostrophe S audio. Now let's get into it.
And yes, it is indeed a collaborative effort. Welcome back to what is going to be now episode 74 of the Mike to New Haven podcast. I believe it is episode 74. I always lose track. I've been losing track lately. It is episode 74. And for those of you that will be watching and listening on my end, you see him. He is back. If you're watching on YouTube, or you'll hear his voice for all of you listening on the audio platforms. It's Marvin McIntyre, my buddy from my college days, back once again. Him and I talk sports all the time off the air. And we're going to bring our conversations to life on the air once again. He joins me after originally joining me twice, originally first for an NBA preview of the season, the regular season. We also did a Super Bowl breakdown a few months back, and now he has returned to the show to break down the NBA playoffs, which will be featuring my beloved New York Knicks. So welcome back, Marvin. Happy to have you back.
Back at it again. Let's get started.
Indeed. Let's do it.
So now we're going to dive into the Hall of Fame. Let's give our reactions. So what did you think about it, Mike?
As far as the 2020 class is concerned, I thought it was fitting. Obviously, we're all sad that Kobe Bryant is not around to give his Hall of Fame induction speech. It's a shame that granted, obviously, Vanessa Bryant did a fantastic job. She gave a great speech, and how she didn't break down crying and get emotional at any point during the speech is beyond me. She's a very, very strong woman, but we all wish she could have been there. But it's a great class. Kobe, Tim Duncan, and of course, Kevin Garnett. You talk about three guys that really defined the NBA in the 2000s. KG was around the 90s, and obviously Tim Duncan won his first championship in the 90s, but they didn't quite cement their legacies until the 2000s. Tim Duncan, of the 5 championships he won, 4 were won this century. Kevin Garnett won his only championship this century and made the NBA Finals twice and took the Timberwolves the farthest they've ever been to the conference finals in 2004 this century. And Kobe's legacy, I mean, his resume speaks for itself. So I was very happy to see those 3 get in, but it's bittersweet that Kobe's not around to enjoy it.
Yeah, I thought it was very good. I thought that Vanessa Bryant, she had a very, very good speech. And I definitely like Tim Duncan's and KG's as well. I thought that Tim Duncan's, his seemed like the most freestyle. And I felt like everybody deserved to be in the Hall of Fame, most definitely. There's no way that you can really deny anybody. And it's one of the best Hall of Fame classes ever, if not the best. So.
Yeah, it'll certainly go down as such. I mean, the 2009 class, which featured Michael Jordan and John Stockton, was pretty good too. But I think between the accomplishments in terms of championships, in terms of all-star selections, MVPs, between the 3, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better class than the class of 2020. And 2021, which I know we'll get to a little later, wasn't too shabby either.
Right. So that brings me to my question. Do you think that this is the greatest Hall of Fame class ever? Since we just kind of answered it to a degree.
Yeah, it's pretty much, it's up there. It's top 10 classes all time. I thought that, like I said earlier, I thought the 2009 class was pretty outstanding, but given the enormity of the star power of these 3 men, and not only that, Rudy Tomjanovich, one of the best coaches ever, also getting in this year.
Right.
You who, of course, led the Rockets to 2 championships back-to-back during that brief period Michael Jordan was away in the mid-90s, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better class than this one. I think everybody, between, of course, WNBA inductees as well and other inductees, but as far as on the NBA side, with the players that were inducted, with the coach that was inducted this year, everybody had a very strong resume. So it's definitely one of the best classes to ever be inducted.
I definitely think that that if you go like case by case, Michael Jordan's better than everybody on that list, right?
Yeah.
Right, but Tim Duncan, he's in the top 5. So, and then you have Tim Duncan's better than John Stockton. and it's comparable between KG and Duncan and David Robinson. So in terms of resume and things like that, you know.
Right. Yeah.
So where do you think that Kobe ranks in your
My all time.
Yeah, in your all time list?
Well, he's the GOAT. No, I'm kidding. He's not the GOAT. Michael Jordan, of course, is the GOAT. Or unless you want to say Bill Russell, that works too. Kobe, I go back and forth with because in my earlier years of NBA fandom, because you have to remember, I started watching the NBA. I said this to a buddy of mine, shout out to George, a while ago, when we were talking about Kobe the other day. I said, you know, I caught Kobe's I caught exactly the perfect amount of the second half of his career, because I started watching the NBA. Right, I started watching the NBA in 2006, and Kobe played an even 20 years, so I missed 96 to 06, but I caught 06 to 16, so I caught the entirety of the second half of his career, and he was really my introduction to basketball, even as someone that grew up and still is a diehard Knicks fan. So I earlier in my fandom put him top 5. But, you know, given the amount of names at the top, when you talk about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, when you talk about, of course, Michael Jordan, when you talk about Bill Russell, and there's an argument for Wilt Chamberlain, of course, there's an argument for Hakeem Olajuwon. I don't know if he fits in my top 5, but he is all time. I think if you don't have Kobe Bryant in your top 10, you know, you're kind of doing it wrong. I don't think he's a top 5 player. I mean, I'd have to put Magic Johnson even ahead of him in terms of legacy and impact. But in your top 10, Kobe Bryant has to be there. I think it'd be disrespectful. And I'm saying this not because of the way that the tragic way in which he died. I'm just saying this looking strictly at him as a player. It'd be disrespectful not to have him in your top 10.
Well, that's pretty funny because I don't have him in my top 10.
Really? Really? Okay. Well, you have him in your top 15, though, I imagine. Top 15, top 20.
Yeah, of course. I have him in my top 15.
So why doesn't he crack the top 10?
Because, well, he was a copycat
of MJ.
He was a copycat of MJ. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, they like to forget that he also went over to Hakeem Olajuwon's camp to learn how to be better in the post. So that's a testament to how good Olajuwon was. And, you know, he tried so hard to be like MJ, but he was really, he was trying to be MJ 2.0, but he ended up being MJ 0.5. You know, MJ, you know, he had he was more athletic, better first step. Obviously, he was better defender. You know, he won the Defensive Player of the Year, and you know, he was just unguardable. And then on top of it, he was extremely efficient. And the players I had in my top 10, I think that Shaq was better than him.
Yeah, I have Shaq in my top 10.
I think Larry Bird was better than him. I think Tim Duncan was better than him. I think a whole lot of players that were in the top 10 are better than him, including LeBron James.
Yeah, so, I think, for sure. Go ahead.
I mean, like, Kobe or whatever, you know, like, he gets a whole lot of love, and it's understandable. I like Kobe, too. He was one of my favorite players growing up. I used to take a whole bunch of jump shots and say Kobe, but that does not make him a top 15 player in my eyes. You know, he's had bad series in his career pertaining to the Pistons, the Suns, where he was up 3-1 and then he choked in that last game in round 1. Kobe, he was very ferocious, and but to me, I don't think that he really got into his prime until he. I don't think that he really came to his own until he won his MVP, which was in 2008. So that's when he came into his own maturity wise and into where everybody decided or wanted to declare him as one of the best in the game. But he was one of the best back then. But it was just more so of his athletic prime and his talent that was carrying him through. But once he started getting mentally, that's where people started to think, oh, maybe he is up there with a lot of players. But again, I just have him as top 15.
Well, when they won their first three championships, obviously Shaq was the one and Kobe was the 1A, without question. Definitively, that was Shaq's team. Kobe was a valuable contributor.
I don't really know. Sorry.
No.
I don't really know if I could call Kobe 1A. Okay.
Well, who would you put above on those Laker teams of the early 2000s?
I would call him like he was a Robin, right? But he was
that's what I'm saying.
He was a Robin, but he was like the lowest version of Robin. You know what I'm saying? Like, because like he could have did, like, think about this. If it wasn't for Shaq, they would not be in the finals. Shaq, he had already been to a finals earlier in his career, prior to Kobe in the first place. Kobe, without Phil Jackson and Shaq, and maybe Lamar Odom and Pau Gasol, who will be in the Hall of Fame.
Sure. Yeah.
It's very possible that he would be a T-Mac. Just somebody who shoots shots. Now, I think that he would get more further than T-Mac, second round. But without those people, I don't really think that he would be where he is. I still think that he would be a Hall of Fame. But I know it sounds very strict on what I'm saying, but I just don't really see him being able to elevate as what people want to say that he. I don't really see him being ranked so high. That's why I have him top 15. So.
And I was, I wasn't saying that he was the one. That's what I'm saying. That was Shaq's team. Shaq was the one, but Kobe was obviously, as you were saying, the 1A, the Robin. That's what I was saying, that he was the second best player on that team. I don't think there was ever a window up until later in Kobe's career that he was definitively the best player in the league. Because when he was winning championships, he was not the best. Originally, he was not the best player in the league with Shaq. But from 2007 to I want to say 2011, 2012, that 5-year window, Kobe Bryant was definitively the best player in the league. Before LeBron really molded into his own and won his first few rings, Kobe Bryant, for that period where he won MVPs, he won championships, he went to 3 straight finals from 2008 to 2010. That was his apex of his career, where he for sure was, without question, the best player in the league. But from 96 to 07, he was definitely one of the best, but never the best up until that aforementioned period.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. So in 07, was Kobe in the playoffs?
In 2006, 2007, yeah, he was. He made it and he lost to Phoenix in the first round. 07, 08, that's what I'm talking about. 07, 08, where he won MVP and took the Lakers to the finals, but they lost to Boston. That's that period. Starting from that season to 2012, that's when that to me was the window in which Kobe was the best player definitively in the league.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on. So for Tim Duncan, where do you rank him?
Well, Tim Duncan's in my top 10 as well. Kobe Bryant's towards the back half of my top 10. Tim Duncan's in that 6 through 10 range as well. I think Tim Duncan is really, because he was so quiet, he never really was an outspoken, outlandish personality. Kobe Bryant had a lot of charisma. Kevin Garnett had a lot of charisma as well. Speaking of other people, and obviously in the Hall of Fame class of 2020, Tim Duncan was the quiet, under the radar, low maintenance superstar. He was the kind of guy that just blended in, and it's hard to blend in, obviously, when you're 7 feet tall and, one of the best players on the planet. But Tim Duncan was that kind of guy that he never really made a big deal out of himself. He didn't take himself too seriously. He was a hard worker, a tenacious and ferocious competitor. And really, he was so quiet, you just forgot how good he was. Tim Duncan's resume, if you ever pull it up, and for those of you listening, pull it up on Wikipedia when you have time. Tim Duncan's resume is one of the most impressive resumes, not just in NBA history, but in sports history. What he was able to do across a 19-year career and how consistent he was able to remain, even as he got towards the back half and got older. He was the same player in 97, 98 when he was a rookie and helped the Spurs a year after only winning 20 games, win 56 and win a playoff series, that he was in 2013-14 when he won his last championship over LeBron and the Heat. So when I look at Tim Duncan, when you think of the NBA in the 2000s, there are a slew of people that you think of. Obviously, LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, Shaquille O'Neal, Kobe. We just talked about Garnett. You also think Dirk Nowitzki. You also think of Tim Duncan. He's up there. Tim Duncan, arguably at various points in the 2000s, defined that era of basketball. And not only was it his longevity that was able to contribute to such an outstanding career, but it was his consistency and his ability to dominate at any given point. He dominated the New York Knicks in the 1999 NBA Finals. He dominated the New Jersey Nets in the 2003 Finals. He dominated a young LeBron in 2007, and he dominated him one more time in the 2014 Finals. So he is somebody that never really fell off to where you could look at him and say, yeah, it's about time he hang it up. Tim Duncan was good from start, quite literally, to finish.
Yeah, I mean, Tim Duncan was an all-time great. He has like a whole lot of stats that were like you could like he has like stats that are maybe in the top 15. Like like he has like maybe like cumulative stats that are in the top 15. Tim Duncan, I would put him in the 6 range, like right at number 6. Tim Duncan, he was a great leader. He was very quiet, but I've definitely heard that he's very passionate about the game and things like that. I think that Tim Duncan, he was more of a lead by example type of player. And because he wasn't flashy or somebody who had like highlight dunks like a Kobe or Vince Carter, that's why he did not get the notoriety that he deserved. And if he had those types of dunks, maybe people they would see him in a much more popular light. But Tim Duncan, he definitely was great, and definitely the best power forward of all time.
Right, for sure, definitively. And I just a couple things too that I want to highlight before we move on. Think about the competition he played against in the 90s and the early 2000s, throughout the mid 2000s, who he had to go through to win his championships. Now, you can make the argument that with the exception of the 2005 Pistons and the Miami Heat of the early 2010s, that he didn't have stiff competition in the finals. The 99 Knicks were a very spirited team, a very ferocious team that played their hearts out, but they were very injured. The 2003 Nets only had Jason Kidd and Kenyon Martin and a bunch of solid but not really great role players. Obviously, 07 was just LeBron and a good defensive team, but an offensively challenged team as well. But to get to the finals, he had to go through prime Kobe and Shaq. He had to go through prime Dirk Nowitzki numerous times. He had to go through prime Steve Nash numerous times. He had to go through Chris Paul quite a few times. He did not have an easy road. Later on, the grit and grind Memphis Grizzlies with the in his prime Marc Gasol. So it was never an easy road through the Western Conference throughout the 2000s and the early 2010s for Tim Duncan, which makes it even more impressive. And before we move on, just a quick read of his resume: 5-time NBA champion, 3-time Finals MVP, 2-time MVP, back-to-back, by the way, 2002 and 2003, 15-time All-Star, All-Star Game MVP in 2000, 10-time All-NBA first team, 3-time All-NBA second team, 2-time All-NBA third team, 8-time All-NBA defensive first team, Rookie of the Year, Rookie first team in 98, 7-time All-NBA defensive second team. Like I said, one of the most impressive resumes in NBA history.
Of course, definitely. And, that's why he's in the Hall of Fame. And, and that's why that he's the best power forward of all time. And I would also say that that Tim Duncan has had better I would say that Tim Duncan sorry about
Let's throw it to a quick break
I
here
would
on the
say
Mike
that's-
Name podcast. All right, we are back. We had a bit of a situation, but after that brief distraction, we are back here on the crossover edition of the Mike Name podcast and the Miles Ahead podcast. Mike Cologne and Marvin McIntyre back with Marvin, as you were saying regarding Tim Duncan.
Yeah, so I would say that Tim Duncan is arguably better than LeBron. You know, he's had more better competition in the finals, better competition in the West, in the Wild Wild West, and you could also say that he's also beat LeBron twice in the finals. And not only that, if it wasn't for Ray Allen and the miracle shot that he hit, that was saved by Chris Bosh, and Greg Popovich not having Tim Duncan on the floor, you know, we could arguably say that he's 3-0 against LeBron. You know, and he's already 5-1 against 5-1 in the finals period. So what would happen if he's 6-0? If he was 6-0, people, they can make the case that he's the greatest player ever, but he's not, obviously. And I wouldn't make that case either. But I'm just saying is that the undefeated allure kind of helps with those types of situations when it comes to being compared to Kareem and Magic and all the other players. You know, you could arguably put Tim Duncan at number 2. So, you know, LeBron or whatever, he has a very interesting resume, and but he's played in the East. That was very easy. So, so that's why I could arguably make a case for Tim Duncan being better than LeBron. Obviously, he was a better defender. Tim Duncan was. He was a better rebounder, a better, you know, leader, and he won more. I think the Spurs, like, they had like the most amount of like they went a very long time with having 50 plus wins. What was it, like 20 years, something like that? So I mean, you know, Tim Duncan, he's an all-time great, definitely an all-time great. Now, where would you rank KG? Because I have KG probably around top 30. Top 30.
He doesn't. That's probably right, because he doesn't fit. He's not in my top 10, and that's no disrespect to him. It's
Right.
just there's a bevy of players that one would put in the top 10 ahead of KG. I think even the biggest Celtic fan and Timberwolves fan, where he obviously spent the majority of his career and accomplished the most between those two franchises, would tell you the same thing. But with Garnett, he's probably, that's fair, top 25, top 30, an outstanding career. And he had it's funny, if social media was around in the 90s to the extent that it is today, he would catch a lot of slander because he took, and granted, it's not fair because the Timberwolves were an expansion franchise and not a very good team at that. And he came out of high school and had the unenviable task of putting that team on the map. So the first playoff appearance in Minnesota was 1997. So from 1997 to 2004, they made the playoffs every year. 1997 to 2003, they did not make it out of the first round. They lost in the first round 6 consecutive seasons. He would have caught a lot of heat for that. So finally, in 2003, 2004, he broke the mold. He finally got out of the first round. The Timberwolves were the number 1 seed. They got out of the second round, played a really brutal series against Chris Webber and the Kings, in which was essentially Sacramento's last hurrah as a championship contender. And then they lost to that super team of Kobe and Shaq with Gary Payton and Karl Malone and Derek Fisher and all these other characters that got to the finals and got obliterated by Detroit. So he went through a period where he essentially only won 2 playoff series. What helps his legacy, and I hate to define things by championships. I don't, because if you're going to say, well, that guy wasn't that great, he never won a ring. Well, then you know what? You're disrespecting Allen Iverson. You're disrespecting Pistol Pete Maravich. You're disrespecting somebody like a Karl Malone or a John Stockton, all of whom were Hall of Fame caliber players that unfortunately never won the big one. So it's not defined by that. But obviously, when you go to a historic franchise like Boston, when you have the kind of season that 07-08 Celtics team had, And of course, when you knock off a historic franchise like the Lakers, it elevates your legacy. And you know what? I think it's a credit to Kevin Garnett. Let's look at that 2008 to 2010 period where he wins his first championship. 2009, the Celtics come back the next year and win 62 games. They defend their title well. They're very poised to make another deep playoff run. They weren't the one seed because that's the year that LeBron James won 66 games with that Cavalier team. But Dwight beat them both and made the finals. Kevin Garnett got hurt in that second round. And that was a big injury. Even though the Celtics still had Paul Pierce, even though the Celtics still had Ray Allen, when KG went down, their fortunes changed. And they lost that game 7 at home to a young, in his prime Dwight Howard and the Magic, who would go on to beat LeBron in conference finals before losing to Kobe in the NBA finals. The next year, KG is healthy. Celtics don't win as many games. They only win 50. Still a pretty good season. They're the number 4 seed. They get out the first round. They knock off LeBron, who was a 1 seed that year, knock off an in his prime Dwight Howard, who would have gotten them the year before in the conference finals in 6 games, and scare the heck out of the Lakers and take them to 7. So you see the difference? I mean, KG's value was such in that time period, and that's what really cements his legacy. He was a valuable contributor to a championship team. Again, like Tim Duncan, another remarkably consistent player, but he's not somebody that's top 15, top 10 of all time, but a tremendous career and a deserved Hall of Fame induction.
To me, if Tim Duncan isn't on the Boston Celtics, I don't really know if he ever really makes the Hall of Fame.
Tim Duncan almost went to the Celtics too. I mean,
he would be. I mean, not Tim Duncan, KG. My fault.
No, because I was going to say Tim Duncan would have gotten drafted by the Celtics in '98, but the lottery ball went the Spurs' way.
Yeah. If KG never goes to the Celtics, I don't know if he would have went to the Hall of Fame, or it's possible that he would have, but it probably would have been, way later on down the line.
It wouldn't have been first ballot.
Definitely would not have been first ballot.
No.
In fact, I almost feel like if it wasn't for the Celtics, we probably would not rank him so high in terms of where he is on the hierarchy in terms of power forwards.
Yeah, I agree with that.
He was a great defender, but he just did not really do a lot of scoring, although that his athleticism was very good. He had very good athleticism, and he did not really use that to drop 25 a night, which he could have, and he definitely should have been scoring 25 a night at least. And to me, he was the anchor, the defensive anchor, and he definitely did help with the leadership and ferociousness of the Boston Celtics. But I felt like the Boston Celtics, they underachieved. They should have won at least 2-3 more.
Yeah, I agree with that. They should have beaten the Lakers in 2010.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, look, Kobe Bryant is a Ron Artest jump shot away from losing. So, shout out to Ron Artest for that for him hitting that game winner.
Yeah, that was a 3-point game too.
It was a big one, and basically, I'm just saying is that, they definitely did underachieve, and maybe that was because of them getting older, or maybe it was because of the coaching not really being that good. You know how I feel about Doc Rivers.
Yeah, we'll talk about Doc a little bit later.
Not really that good as a coach. But yeah, I mean, let's move on. Whose career would you rather have between Tim Duncan or Kobe?
Wow, that's a good question. Tim Duncan or Kobe Bryant, both outstanding careers. If we're talking strictly, I mean, we're not factoring anything that may have happened off the court, obviously. If we're talking strictly on the court, I'd have to go Tim Duncan, mainly because Tim Duncan, and this Kobe got older, and obviously he was still a very effective player right up until he tore his Achilles, and after he tore his Achilles, he was somebody that was at the end of the road. But over the course of two outstanding 20-year careers, Tim Duncan almost 20 years, he played 19, one less year than Kobe. I take Tim Duncan's career again because you know what, the supporting cast. The Spurs did a great job of routinely putting a great supporting cast around Tim Duncan and finding and finding just the right players at different points in Tim's career to fit his game perfectly. Whereas they didn't do that with Kobe. Now, when Kobe came in, as we mentioned earlier, were the Lakers his team? No, it was Shaquille O'Neal's team from 1996 to 2004. And so they built that team strictly around mostly Shaq. I mean, I'm pretty sure they complimented Kobe too, but bringing those guys that they brought in, like Derek Fisher, like Ron Harper, Robert Horry, it was more to compliment Shaq than anything. And later on, did Kobe get his help? Yeah, Ron Artest. They brought back Derek Fisher after he left. They brought in, of course, Paul Gasol, and they won 2 more championships. But Tim Duncan, think about when he first came in. David Robinson was there. Jaren Jackson was there. Vinny Del Negro was there. Steve Kerr, Mario Elie, one of the great clutch postseason performers in the history of the sport. So he had a great team. And once David got older, who they bring in after those other guys left? Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, of course, Steven Jackson, Robert Horry, a big part of those Lakers dynasty teams. That was a factor. Later on, they brought in Michael Finley. They brought in, when he won his 5th and final championship, Kawhi Leonard was there. Matt Bonner was there, Tiago Splitter, Boris Diaw, amongst other major contributors to that great 2014 Spurs team. So when you factor something like that in, I'd rather have his career because the Spurs, the front office, did a great job of realizing where he was at in each stage of his career, knowing exactly what he needed, and subsequently going out and getting those players.
The front office may have did a very good job, right? But I would say this, is that Tim Duncan, he literally made Hall of Famers.
Yeah.
You know, he made Hall of Famers. He made Tony Parker a Hall of Famer. He made Manu Ginobili a Hall of Famer. Manu Ginobili and Tony Parker, they didn't make him. So for anybody who says that that it was this big super team out in the West by the Spurs, it was nowhere near close to a super team. The Spurs, they were more so a very good team to great team. They were not a super team, never a super team. And to me, without Tim Duncan, I don't even think that Greg Popovich is even still coaching, to be honest with you.
Tim Duncan and Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah, I mean, Tim Duncan and Kawhi Leonard, he's a product of the talent that he got. And which a lot of coaches are. Mm-hmm. A lot of coaches are. But tell you the truth, the person who's really hanging on to that talent is probably Doc Rivers, but we're not going to get into that later.
Yeah, he'll catch his slam.
Yeah. But as I said, I would rather have Tim Duncan's career because he his career or his talent wasn't based on athleticism like Kobe's. His strength was really based on his skill set, and that's why it lasted so long. Or his reign of winning was so long because of that reason. Kobe's winning stopped in 2010, and Tim Duncan his stopped in 2014. So and like he was just a better defender, and he was able to score when needed to, and he was actually an underrated clutch player, and he also had a higher PER than Kobe does. Yeah. I believe that Kobe's like 24th all time. So, and he was better in the playoffs as well than Kobe. But if I wanted to pick somebody for player and to be cool or to like to make all the highlights and to be known, all that type of stuff, I would choose Kobe. But
Right.
for a career and winning and all that type of stuff, again, like Tim Duncan, he has 2 MVPs to Kobe's 1.
And back to back too. And he won them back to back seasons.
Back to back. Yeah, so I mean, so I'd rather have Tim Duncan's career.
Right, and before we move on, I just wanted to add one last note before we move on. To your point earlier about Ginobili and Parker was an excellent point, because by the time those two even got the Spurs in 2001, Tim Duncan was already an NBA champion and an NBA Finals MVP. That's all I wanted to say.
Right. And mind you, not only did he win that championship, David Robinson, he was on his last legs. I mean, in terms of his athleticism, because he had hurt his back, so he wasn't really the same player as he used to be. So let's move on. Should Robert Horry be a Hall of Famer?
No. I don't. Listen, I admire Rudy Tomjanovich going up there and saying what he said about Robert Horry. Rudy Tomjanovich is coming from a good place. That was one of his players. That was one of his guys. And if you're a good coach, if you're a true players coach, you stick up for your guys. And listen, Robert Horry's resume is very impressive. He was a big-time contributor to 7 championship teams. He's one of the clutchest performers in playoff history. The guy never, ever had a big shot, met a big moment, whatever you want to say, that he didn't like, that he shied away from. And there's a bevy of different moments that you can name of Robert Horry hitting clutch shots. 2 that come to mind for me off the bat are that game winner he hit against the Sacramento Kings in Game 4 of the 2002 Western Conference Finals. He doesn't hit that 3. The Lakers are down 3-1 that series. Ties the series up to 2. And then, of course, a few years later, Game 5, the 2005 NBA Finals against the Detroit Pistons, who were the defending champions, hits that 3 with seconds to go in overtime, puts them up by 1. They win that game. They go up 3-2. They win the series in 7 games. He had a bevy of moments, a big part of the 94 and 95 Houston Rockets, the back-to-back championship Rockets teams. Big shot after big shot for the 2000, 2001, 2002 Lakers. Big shot after big shot for the 2005 and 2007 San Antonio Spurs. So he had a great career. He was a very valuable role contributor. But would you ever look at Robert Horry at any point and define Robert Horry as one of the best players of his era? No, he was never a top 10 player in the league. He was never a top 15 or even top 20 player in the league. He was what he was, which was a really good clutch shooter, role player off the bench who enjoyed a very nice career and he earned, to be fair to him, those 7 rings, absolutely earned them, played his part for sure. But there's a lot of guys across a lot of different championship teams that did the little things, that played their part to make sure that their teams ended up on top. Doesn't make them Hall of Famers. He is what he is, a nice player.
So, when you talk about Hall of Fame, right?
Mm-hmm.
Aren't there Hall of Fame role players? So, if there are,
I'm not sure.
Then he should be in the Hall of Fame.
I'm not sure.
Well, look, think about this. What's his name? Bill Russell. He had a whole bunch of Hall of Famers.
Yeah, John Cousy,
on his team.
Or Bob Cousy,
I think at least
John Havlicek.
9 or 10 or something like that. I mean, he had a whole lot, but I think that only maybe about 4 really deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. If you look at their stats, and there's been quite a few players who have made the Hall of Fame as a role player. Scottie Pippen, he was really a star role player, but he made the Hall of Fame. You know, he would be nothing without MJ, right?
But you know the thing about
Kevin McHale.
True.
Hold on, Kevin McHale is technically a star role player. Now wait, he definitely did put in great numbers, and he has great winning pedigree and things like that. But if it wasn't for Bird, you know,
yeah, you can make that argument.
Now I'm not calling Robert Parrish a role player per se, but but because he was on the Celtics, that definitely did help. That definitely did help with him getting to the Hall of Fame. So there are star role players who have made the Hall of Fame. Now I don't know. Now I would not call Robert Horry a star, right? But like
No.
for what he just sorry. But for what he's done or whatever in terms of coming up clutch, for times when it's needed the most, when certain things, when clutch players that are expected to make those shots don't make those shots, a case can be made for him to go to the Hall of Fame for those reasons. But would I put him in there personally? No, I wouldn't put him in there personally. But I could see why somebody would try to make the argument that he should be in there because of him winning 7 rings and him being a huge contributor to those rings. Because look, it's tough to make shots.
It is.
It's tough.
It is, but I do want to add this. I mean, when you bring up McHale, there was a point in the 80s when people would put Kevin McHale as one of the 10 best players in the league. There was a point throughout majority of the 90s when people would put Scottie Pippen as one of the 10, if not 5 best players in the league. Look at what Scottie was able – did he win championships without Michael? No, of course not. But look at the numbers he put up in those 2 seasons Michael was away. Scottie led that team. And in 1994 particularly, if Scottie doesn't get – and listen, I say this as a Knicks fan. I'm speaking objectively. If Scottie doesn't get that phantom foul called on him in Game 5 against the Knicks in the second round in 94, the Bulls go up 3-2 in that series. They go out to Chicago, close out the Knicks in their arena. They go play the Pacers and Reggie Miller in the conference finals, probably knock them off too, and go to the NBA finals. Now, would they have beaten Hakeem and the Rockets? I don't think so, but they would have been in the finals without MJ. So Scottie Pippen was the best player on that team. So I wouldn't go as far as to define Scottie Pippen or Kevin McHale as star role players. There are guys that I do agree would not be where they are had it not been for the fact that they played with insert all-time great here. McHale and Parrish certainly owe their careers to Larry Bird. They would have had nice careers and put up nice numbers without Larry Bird, but they wouldn't have accomplished as much as they did and have the pedigree that they do in their careers had it not been for Larry Bird. Same thing with Scottie and Michael. Scottie does not have the resume he does without Michael being Michael. But the idea that Robert Horry fits into that conversation, yes, Robert Horry, the same way Ray Allen is responsible for saving LeBron James's legacy, Robert Horry is responsible for preserving the Lakers dynasty in that three-peat. The Lakers don't three-peat if Robert Horry doesn't hit that shot in 2002. Tim Duncan maybe doesn't have 5 rings if he doesn't hit that shot in Game 5 against Detroit in 2005 or other big shots along the way in 2007 as well. Right. Robert Horry, if you take Robert Horry and you take him out of a situation where he's not on a great team, where he's on a mediocre team, which he was for a period of time in Phoenix briefly. Robert Horry, again, what is Robert Horry? Just a jag, basically, to borrow an old Bill Parcells line. He's just another guy. He was never a guy that was going to lift up a team. He was never a guy that was going to carry a team like Pippen did, like McHale did at different points. So we both agree we wouldn't put him in the Hall of Fame, but as far as star role players, I mean, sure, yeah, you can put them, you can make the argument for certain guys if you want to, but the idea that he belongs, no. He deserves a shout out in a Hall of Fame speech, but he doesn't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I mean, I never said that he should be in there.
No, I know. I'm just saying it. I'm just saying in general. Yeah. If you're,
I can see why they would make that argument. Definitely.
No, yeah, for sure. Listen, if your name is Hakeem Olajuwon, Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker, or Shaquille O'Neal, you better send Robert Horry thank you cards every other month because he's a big reason as to why you have your rings. For sure. Right. What credit is due.
Right. But pertaining to Scottie Pippen, if he was on his own team, separate from Michael and Phil Jackson, because Phil Jackson, he was the one who was running everything. Mm-hmm. And listen, the system was still still around pertaining to everything. With the triangle and things like that, with how they run their stuff. If he was on a separate team, I don't think that he makes the playoffs.
Well, I disagree with that because I just stop you real quick. When he was on Portland,
you're talking about Portland, but Portland, they had a very they had very good talent on their team. They had Rasheed Wallace.
They did
on that team. They had
Damon Stoudemire, Bonzi Wells, Brian Grant.
Bonzi Wells, right?
Yeah, Bonzi Wells, Damon Stoudemire,
They had very good talent on their team.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
But 1999.
Right. But the only thing that they were missing was a go-to guy who could hit a bucket, which probably would have been Jordan. They probably would have won.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. So that's the only person they were missing. But even within that season, Scottie Pippen, his numbers weren't that. They weren't all that. They were okay, They weren't great. So, I mean, like the reason why he was even able to get as far as he did is because of the experience that he had with the Bulls. So, and plus he's 6'7" and he's long as a defender and things like that.
Yeah, so. And he had a great athleticism. And I will say this: I told this to Howard Beck when he was the great Sports Illustrated writer. If that game 7, against the Lakers in the 2000 Western Conference Finals when they were up 15 in the fourth quarter, that season Scottie was Portland's best player. He was their go-to guy that season. Because this is before his injuries. This is before his back really started to give out on him and really send him down to the end of the road. He was still an effective player. This is before injuries took their toll on him. He had hit some game winners in the postseason. He had closed out Utah the round before. If he closes out the Lakers in Game 7 and goes on to beat Reggie Miller and the Pacers in the finals, his that's one of the biggest what ifs in NBA history because his legacy is drastically different. If he wins one without Michael, and just to get to a finals without Michael, there's the two big what ifs of Scottie's career is if he doesn't get that foul called on him, as I said earlier, 94 against the Knicks, and if the Blazers don't choke away the lead in Game 7 against the Lakers in 2000.
Yeah, but it was a nice what if.
Yeah. Coulda, woulda, shoulda. I agree.
Yeah. Okay. Now let's move on. So, whose career would you rather have compared to Robert Ory? Okay. So let's start with T-Mac. Would you rather have T-Mac's or Robert Ory's?
We're gonna. You know what? If our buddy Alan listens to this podcast. Alan's gonna get really heated at me. I'd have Robert Ory's because T-Mac, we talked about how Garnett for the majority of the first half of his career couldn't get out of the first round. T-Mac, that was T-Mac's problem, man. T-Mac never got out of the first round. And the only, between the Magic, between the Raptors, the Magic, then the Rockets, it wasn't until way later that the Rockets finally won a playoff series, and that was 2009 when they took the Lakers to 7 in the second round. He didn't even play in that series because he was hurt. And 2013, when he made the NBA Finals, and he was seconds away from winning his first ring before Ray Allen decided that he wasn't going to let that happen, T-Mac was a guy off the end of the bench. He got his playing time. He was out there. But T-Mac was at the shell of himself by this point in his career. So, listen, again, Robert Ory, as we said earlier, we don't need to rehash it again. He was a valuable with capital V role player to 7 different championship teams and one dynasty, which is the Lakers dynasty of the early 2000s and that three-peat. So, of course, I'd rather have his career over T-Mac's. T-Mac was the better player, obviously, but as far as career, I'm taking Robert Ory.
Yeah, I would agree. Alan. Yeah, funny story. I remember in 2013, And I said, yo, I was talking to my dad. I said, yo, Dad, yo, they got T-Mac. It's about to be a wrap. And then after that, yo, he did not score that whole entire game. And then after that, like it was terrible. Like he was like a straight up bench player type. I said, oh wow, I really thought I was gonna see something, but it just didn't happen.
No, he was washed.
So
you know what? He wasn't
funny.
even that old. He was 34 at the time, but injuries had gotten to him, you know, unfortunately, and that really sapped his ability to still be a great player.
Yeah, and my dad was like, yo, he ain't got nothing more.
No, he didn't. Sadly, he didn't.
Yeah. So Reggie Miller, would you rather have Robert Ory's or Reggie Miller?
I have to speak objectively because I didn't live through Reggie Miller torturing the Knicks in the '90s, so I don't like him as a broadcaster. I think he stinks as a broadcaster, but as a player, I can look at him objectively because I didn't see his heyday. And for any Knicks fans in the '90s, the mere mention any Knicks fan that lived through the '90s, if you mention Reggie Miller's name, their blood just starts to boil, understandably. But great career. Made it to a finals. He lost to prime Kobe and Shaq and against a great Laker team that won 67 games. No shame in that. Took him 6. That's a tougher one. Is Reggie for a time, he was for a brief period, I mean, a top 10, top 15 player in the league in the late 90s. Definitely one of the greatest shooters ever. I think I would still take Robert Ory's career. Reggie was a confident player, and Reggie, credit where credit is due, is the only other man besides Patrick Ewing in the 90s to take Michael Jordan's 7. And if the Pacers had a bit of a mini meltdown, it was a close game, but the Pacers had a bit of a mini meltdown, and they couldn't get offensive rebounds late, and they gave up a lot of second chance points in that game 7 against the Bulls in '98. But, again, coulda, woulda, shoulda. Reggie had an outstanding career. He's deservedly in the Hall of Fame. But I don't think I'd take his career over Robert Ory's. Again, better player. Everybody that you're going to mention is a better player than Robert Ory. But as far as the career itself, who wouldn't want to be Big Shot Bob? It'd take a lot to convince me otherwise.
You know what? I might have to say it's really tough. I'm going to have to go with Robert Ory on this one.
Yeah, it's close.
Really
it's
tough.
Close.
It's close. It's close. But, Reggie Miller, he's in the Hall of Fame. But I can't even really say that he's on the fringe of top 10 shooting guards of all time. Fringe of top 10 shooting guards of all time. Like, he's barely top 10. He was not really a good defender. Yeah, he was clutch, but so was Robert Ory.
Right.
But Robert Ory, he more so made shots to win championships in series. There would be times when Reggie Miller, it would be like, where are you? We're missing you, type thing in games. So this is why I would take Robert Ory. And let's move on. So Steven Jackson, would you rather have Steven Jackson or Robert Ory?
Oh, this one's easy. Steven Jackson's a clown for a variety of reasons. Steven Jackson, listen, I mean, again, talking on the court, whatever I know off the court he's been involved in some controversy lately with Kwame Brown, which we're not going to discuss here, but speaking strictly on the court, right. Steven Jackson is always one of those what ifs. Now, to be fair, he has a ring. He did win a championship with the 2002-2003 San Antonio Spurs. He was a valuable contributor off the bench. He wasn't a bench warmer. He got his minutes. He made an impact, and a positive one at that. But he's one of those guys that he could have done so much more in his career if he just wasn't such a head case, He got into so much trouble on the court and off that he sabotaged himself. Steven Jackson should have, again, he had a nice career, but it could have been a lot better had he had his head on straight, And so because of that, this is an easy one for me. I'm taking Ory over Jackson. And it's sad because, again, Steven Jackson was an outstanding player at different points in his career. but he never really had his head on straight, like I said.
Yeah, he had good talent. I just don't think that he was there mentally. So I think that's what plagued him.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move on.
Mm-hmm.
Robert Horry or Carmelo Anthony?
Oh, this one's a tough one. Now you're hitting me in my heart because Melo, of course, the Knicks. Melo's the last guy prior to this year that had taken the Knicks to the playoffs, and I think about that. I was thinking a lot about that playoff run the other day when the Knicks clinched. So this one, I have to really try hard to be objective. Carmelo Anthony is one of the best scorers of his era. Carmelo Anthony is a scoring champion. Carmelo Anthony has previously finished in the top three. We forget New York Melo. Denver Melo was something special. Unfortunately, Denver Melo was a lot like 90s, early 2000s, early aughts KG. Melo almost never got out of the first round, except for one. It's a lot like KG because when Melo came into the league, if he wasn't getting knocked out by Tim Duncan, he was getting knocked out by Kobe Bryant. And then one season happened where he got all the way to the conference finals, and they got knocked out by Kobe and the Lakers in 6. Carmelo Anthony, I believe, for his career, in his prime, only won 3 playoff series. The peak of Carmelo Anthony's career is 2000, for my money, 2003 to 2013. He only won 3 playoff series in that entire span. Being the best player on his team, because there was no question who the best player on those Nuggets teams were. Chauncey Billups was there, AI was there, but I think Melo was the number one. The Knicks, of course, obviously, he was the number one. And look at how little he was able to get done. Some of it not his fault, some of it absolutely his fault.
Yeah.
So that being said, for as much as I appreciate those early Melo Knicks years and not the back half, which wasn't as fun, mainly because the Knicks stunk, I got to go with Robert Horry.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, look, Carmelo, he was very interesting because he's the only person out of the 03 class who still compared himself to LeBron for a very long time.
I mean, that was a tough thing, you know?
Yeah, that was pretty funny. It really was. It really was. And, but, I just think that he just didn't really have it mentally. But if he was on the Detroit Pistons, things probably would have been different for him in terms of his career. And if he had just gone to the Miami Heat instead of Chris Bosh, he definitely would have been a lot better viewed if he would have gone there and made big shots and things like that, and won championships. But he didn't because of his mentality. So I would have to go with Robert Horry as well on that one as well. Last one. Chris Paul.
Ah, God.
Or Robert Horry.
Chris Paul or Robert Horry. One of the more complicated characters, I think. One of the more complicated careers in NBA history. A very complex figure is Mr. Paul, who we wish the best in his upcoming battle against LeBron James and the Lakers.
Right.
Oh, God. Chris was a victim of running into the wrong team at the wrong time so much in his career. Early in it, and I'm talking the Hornets years, early in his career. Ran into the Tim Duncan Spurs.
Hornets years,
Yeah. The Hornets years, he ran into Tim Duncan and the Spurs a lot. He would run into the one year the Melo made the conference finals. He went through the Hornets to get there. He ran into Kobe his fair share, and that got knocked out through those means. The Clippers years were a debacle come playoff time because the Clippers were among the best teams in the league, and they just underachieved repeatedly. Never got to conference finals, never got out the second round. Of course, that was that disastrous meltdown where they blew the 3-1 lead against the Rockets 2015, the second round. And then, of course, which is not his fault, he got hurt against the Warriors in the conference finals in 2018. and they went up 3-2, and he wasn't able to play in game 6 and 7, unfortunately, with a bad hamstring, which I felt very bad for him for that, because I would have liked to have seen him go out there for that game 7. But again, Chris Paul's, unless he changes it this year, Chris Paul's career, you're always gonna summarize his career as great player or very good player, but come playoff time, he never insert failure here. And so it's for that reason that, again, player, obviously everybody you just mentioned is a better player than Robert Horry ever was.
Right.
But career, we know that. We're not going to sit here with a straight face and say Robert Horry is a better player than, we're not talking skill. Career-wise.
No, definitely not.
I'm taking Horry.
Right. I'm taking Horry as well. Chris Paul, he only won 7 series in his entire career.
Mm-hmm.